All right. Well, those were interesting. I always appreciate when we're able to bring people here together in Outlier who maybe otherwise would not be perhaps on a panel together, thinking about work that's happening more in the business and consulting space, work happening with really advanced computing and these amazingly dense diagrams that Nikita showed us, and then thinking about this loop where we're including this Gen AI component that goes from a data physicalization idea to making that more accessible and bringing it back to that physical concept again. To kick off our panel, and we'll do a couple quick questions as a group and then move to questions both from our folks online and here in the room. I'd love to hear briefly from each of you, perhaps starting with our colleagues who are joining us virtually. Hi, everyone. Who are joining us virtually, to share about one way in which you see Gen AI tools disrupting the way we do data visualization work in a big or small way that may not have come through in your original talk.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I can kick us off, perhaps. I guess one of the ways that I really love about how Gen AI is positively disrupting how we create data viz is the way that's democratizing the creative process. Thinking back through the history of the advancements of technologies, like, for example, just as the first Macintosh brought the graphical user interface to the masses. So Gen AI empowers anyone with a visual with a vision to craft compelling and insightful visualizations without needing to master the super complex tools. And it's getting better and better to enable people to build something with technology without actually having to pull up the terminals or open the Visual Studio Code on the computer to tinker and make things. So this kind of liberation of creativity could lead to a more, I would say, diverse and inclusive landscape of visual storytelling. And it can enable some fresh perspectives and new solutions that emerge. I just had a friend who recently remade the three I think it's Three Piggy Fairy Tale, that story, completely in Gen AI, and he printed out a book of that new story with the images and the text that's created using Midjourney and GPT respectively, and then has a column of annotation that runs throughout that little booklet that sort of annotates the creative process. So that's also just an example of how I would say generative AI could really democratize the creative process, not just for data visualization, but creating other artifacts and work as well. Yeah.
Want to go ahead and take that next before we move to our colleagues here?
Yeah, so I think there are 2 points that I want to bring up. One is very similar to what Tiange just said. It sort of makes data visualization or the processing of data a lot more accessible. We have all heard this sentence that English is the hottest programming language in the future, and I think what it does is that it sort of makes this thing more accessible and more usable for people with limited coding or data processing experiences. And the second thing about Gen AI and data visualization is that I think it starts to opens up a lot more possibilities about what we want to make data into, because a lot of models are becoming inherently multi-model. Like, we can feed it data and make it think about what happens if it becomes music, if it becomes animation, if it becomes image, or it becomes something even 3D that we can later bring into other software and make it 3D printable. And these are the 2 things that I'm thinking right now. One is easier access. The other is possibility to do things that sort of outside traditional scope of data visualization. Thank you.
Thinking about things like data literacy and maybe going beyond data literacy and reducing coding barriers, do each of you have any additional ways in which you see Gen AI really disrupting kind of our database practice? Rutuja?
Maybe I can share from my experience at the consulting. So now, not everybody is a good storyteller, and when you work in a global team, you have to present to different clients, different locations. So you also have to have this culturally context aware. So is where this co-pilot or something can come into place where it can suggest you, is this a visualization good practice? Are these colors culturally acceptable in that area? So in that sense, for a storytelling perspective, that's a good start. And also second one, which I normally see is like the topic of microcopy. So you have dashboards where you have this technical titles everywhere, and not everybody is so creative to come with, okay, what should I name this KPI? And that's where you have these plugins in place where you can just have these technical topics with your different rules in which you want it in a uniform way, and that's how it generates your different topics for your visualizations. So that's two I would suggest in this area.
Microcopy. That's what we call our chart titles, guys. Microcopy. Nikita?
Yeah, I think I'll just repeat the same point, but I have a very good example. So I have a friend who is a very good designer, but he doesn't know how to code. And he had an idea in mind. He wanted to transform some data and do like a database project. And he couldn't. But just about a year ago with ChatGPT, he asked it to write code. Pretty complex D3 code with custom forces, like difficult equations. And it did it. And the code quality was not that good, but it produced the result my friend wanted and just exported it as an SVG into Figma and finished his project. It wasn't possible before that. So I think it's great that many designers, many people who just have ideas can now execute them using tools like Gen AI, like ChatGPT or any other tool.
So it's interesting thinking about not just kind of the positive disruptions, but also you raised the point of responsible AI being a key thing that has to cut across all of our work. And I don't know if anyone else laughed at some of the Google Gen AI suggestions, like thickening a sauce with Elmer's glue, or the number of rocks you should eat daily according to a geology department website. But because the data that they had was partially trained on Reddit, those were borrowed from examples and responses that came from that space. So maybe the data we're getting and the ideas we're getting are only as good as the base model and what information's been fed in there, which raises some questions about what the different stakes are in terms of getting it wrong, where we may, as we've talked about throughout this conference, have moments where we mislead or intentionally or unintentionally with data viz. And so I wonder if you each might have also a counterpoint of something that we're concerned about going awry with the use of Gen AI in our work, and what's something practitioners should really think about or do in their practice to mitigate some of those risks. Rutuja, do you want to start since you brought up responsible AI in your talk?
Yeah, let me start. So for example, if I just consider the data visualization space, so there are tools which will oversimplify your charts, if there is some complex data set, but they will present to you in a very simplified manner. And then it can cause you misleading information. You can take decisions based on this one. So that's oversimplification is one thing. For you as a user should know that, okay, there are data dependencies in the background, or maybe you have discovered some data points during your discussions with your clients. And that's where responsible AI also comes into picture, where you as practitioners, so if you are presenting these outputs, you should first of all, as I said earlier, you should make them aware that it is AI generated. What is the context? Like in which scenario have you generated these insights to make the users on the same page? And then there is also one good thing is data annotation. So you are the expert, you know these data points, and maybe you have discovered something additional that you want to represent to the users. You can have this data annotation in your reports so that people come to know about it. And lastly is it's always an iterative feedback. So talk to your end users, ask them, is it fair, is it inclusive, and then take that suggestions back into your loop so that you always have something to work upon.
And I keep waiting for humans in the driver's seat instead of just in the loop. That's where I want us to be sitting. Nikita?
Yeah, I think the biggest problem is LLMs always sound confident even when they're wrong. And there is no real way to make sure that the answer they've given you is correct. So you need to have a certain level of expertise to be able to judge. So this is the biggest problem. Another problem is probably we tend to oversimplify things as well. And we want to just do things quickly, integrate LLMs everywhere, and then we just don't think that other people interacting with the tools we have created are using LLMs or were built using LLMs, so they can have these errors produced by hallucinations. And there is no answer for this yet. There is no solution to this problem. So I think it's something for us to figure out collectively.
Let's go ahead and hear from our colleagues joining us virtually, and then we'll turn to some Q&A from our audience, starting with our colleague who'd lined up first, and then Chuck to our virtual stream next. But over to our colleagues coming in virtually.
Hello? Yeah. So one of the things that's related to the illusion, we also sort of encounter it in our design practices, is that sometimes when we ask questions, it comes up with the things that's not necessarily from the data set that we gave it. It's coming out of a massive training data set that is actually not from us. And it becomes sort of difficult for us to, understand, like, and sort of pinpoint exactly, like, where does it get the answer from? So back to what Nikita says, we need some level of expertise and some level of knowledge to make a judgment about if the model is giving a right answer or not.
Yeah, so just to give it like a high level kind of reflection on that process, as we are working through these like issues with AI, I feel like one thing that it feels so easy for us to give up when we're working with AI is like the experience and ability for critical thinking. So I feel like, like critical thinking isn't an easy experience. And it usually, takes iterations, multiple rounds, reflections, questioning stuff and all that. Yet sometimes with AI, it almost feels so smooth and so easy just to let go of that. And I think that's something that we would always like remind ourselves in our practice, like when we're working with AI, our goal is supposed to be, we should try to create like better work with perhaps save some efforts. So like there are always like multiple things that we need to shoot for, the quality of the work and the efficiency and all that, not just like delegating some work to the AI and let it think for us or let it doing something on our behalf. So I think that's something that we should always like as humans maintain, is just like this effort to like think critically about something, and then always like take a step back and examine our ideas and understand what is the key of the work that we do, and that part isn't always easily achievable through like the AI because of all the context and the knowledge that is lacking, that's uniquely to ourselves. So yeah, just at a high level, at a reflection on that process. Yeah.
I love that point about kind of efficiency enabling quantity, but also make that quality a thing that you value too. Chuck, to a question from our virtual attendees now. Sorry for my lack of clarity there. And then after that, to our colleague who's been patiently at the microphone.
Sure, thank you. A number of good questions coming in from around the world. What are your predictions for how the field of data viz will evolve or adapt in, say, the next 5 years or so in terms of Gen AI?
Anyone keen to pick that one up?
Yeah, I can start. I think it will it will become much easier for us to create visualizations. We will spend less time cleaning our data and less time writing code if you write code. It will be more fun to do data viz from my point of view.
I like that. Any additional thoughts from our colleagues, Rutuja, or online?
Maybe I can add something to it. Sure. So I think it would be also a collaboration after the next 5 years. It's nothing that is going to replace human. But if you have heard this talk from the Apple that they have gave in the keynote, Apple Intelligence, so they have dipped into this multiple agents, like agents contacting other agents. Like if you have embedded in, for example, in Siri, then it can ask as well ChatGPT for complex queries. So maybe that is the future as well, like agents interacting with each other. We don't have these standalone plugins or standalone features. Maybe there are tools which can interact with each other so that you can create like a seamless workflow and there will be a less intervention. So that's what I see in the next 5 years.
And to our virtual speakers, do you have thoughts on the next 5 years? We'll try to keep short and sweet so we can at least take questions.
All right. For the next 5 years, I'm really looking forward to how AI has become more embedded in the like everyday online, offline experiences that we go through or things that we interact with. It probably, like right now, it's super visible and super sort of loud. And I feel like the more and more like quote unquote pervasive it is, the more subtle it will be integrated into our everyday lives. Yeah.
Tiange?
Yep, I just got unmuted. So I'm curious to see how the AI will manifest itself, because a lot of the interaction paradigm we have right now is very much similar to a chatbot or some sort of software. I'm curious to see if it will manifest into a physical form, some sort of physical agent, like a small robot or something that actually has a different presence, like from the previous technologies that we have. Thanks.
Up to our question of the mic. You've been so patient since we finished the talks, please.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Shelly. So I have a kind of like a too nerdy question for Nikita. So the library kind of showed earlier, it's like, I don't know, have you heard about deep scatter? It's kind of similar in a way. So I was just curious, what do you think about the similarity and difference between like your library and their library? And I'm also curious how the label was generated. Because I know there's a lot of library they can easily to group the data together, but how to make sense of the data and generate label and what are the useful applications for like those stuff?
Yeah, so thanks for your questions. Deep Scatter, I think it's a library for Python to visualize like your huge point cloud data sets. And it is very similar to Cosmograph. Cosmograph right now is a pure web-based project. So you go online, you upload your CSV file, you get it visualized on the web. We're working on a Python version, which is not there yet, but it will be at some point. And the difference is Cosmograph appeared as a network graph visualization library, so it has its own algorithm engine to analyze, to process data. So it's not just a visualization framework. And we're planning to continue working on this idea, building a tool that doesn't have only the visual layer, but also has the data analysis layer. And as for your second question, could you remind it, please?
Oh, it's about like, I guess the application, because it's like very cool to see all those viz, but I think I struggle in a way to understand. It's like, yes, we saw those data are grouped together. Yes, in this massive data, it's cool to say, oh, Wikipedia, those are all about people, those are about history, and those are, but like, I guess what next? Like, what could we use this to, I guess, for business or for other user to find it? Besides find useful insight, because I kind of feel like maybe also they want something more actionable, right? Based on those.
Yeah, it's a very good question. We have to figure it out because there are many small domains that need these kind of tools. So I can say for sure that many biotech scientists use Cosmograph for their data to visualize big protein networks. People visualize blockchain transactions. And as for visualizing embeddings, whenever you have a data set, for example, to train your model, in many cases, you don't know what's inside. I mean, you know approximately, but there can be outliers, and you might want to go and remove those from your training data. Or let's say you have a problem, you have a chatbot on your website, and people come and people talk, and you need some kind of an audit tool to see if somebody tried to hack your chatbot, what kind of things they talked about with the chatbot. So this can be another big problem to solve, like auditing these hundreds and thousands of LLM conversations. And little funny fact, a story happened to me last night. So I had a cockroach accident in my Airbnb, and I messaged my host, and something felt wrong, strange in her replies. And she was like apologizing. And the final message was strange. It was, I'm glad Nikita reacted positively to the problem. If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know. I'm like, is my host an LLM undercover? Probably.
So let's go ahead and take, Chuck, if we have one more question from our online guests, let's take one more question there, and then we'll wrap up our panel to move to our next speaker.
Thanks. Let me first mention that there's 3 or 4 or 5 awesome questions in here that we're going to take over to the Slack. So this is for everybody. Check out the Slack for this session, in particular later today. I think we can get some good conversation going, but if we can ask at least this one, how can we in the data viz community guide the direction that Gen AI is going?
To our virtual speakers, would you like to take a stab at that first? How the question is, how can the data viz field, we in the data viz field, guide the direction that Gen AI is going?
Yeah, I can start. So I think part of what I find really exciting about data viz is how it like breaks down complex information and communicates them to people. And it breaks down the barrier and make it more accessible for people to understand that information. And there's a story telling component to that. So as LLM make it much easier and more fun for a wider group of people to create visualizations and tell data stories, I feel like the data viz society could take like part of it could take the lead of like crafting the ways that we tell stories with data and combine that with like a humanistic design lens to that, and serve as an example of how we can communicate data in a more human-centered and delightful and creative way, and try to push the edge of how we communicate information with data and serve as that example, and just have fun with it and make great work that could be like an example that's like leading the thinking and creativity of the field. Yeah.
I think what's interesting for Gen AI is that the training set is so massive that it is somewhat inscrutable. And I'm always curious if anyone has spent enough time, or any company has spent enough time to verify the accuracy of every piece of information that they feed into their large language model. And I think for data or database community, it's important to sort of be the gatekeeper and maintain and sort of try to maintain the accuracy of the data.
To our panelists on the stage?
Yeah, maybe I would say that creating awareness, that's very much important, because we live in a world where we are overwhelmed with so many tools, and we don't know how to put it into our use cases. So that's where maybe educational programs, or maybe even when you are having a talk with your mentor or mentee, try making use of these workshop templates. Like for example, from Miro, from Figma, you have this Gen AI capability. So starting small to just discuss your maybe aspirations in that format. I would say awareness is the basic starting. How do you incorporate in your workflows? And that's where data with society also can play a role into.
Yeah, well, I think many of us look at the Gen AI at LLMs very seriously, and we even got scared of the capabilities it has. But I like looking at it as like if it was just a tool to play with. And I think it's the time for us to play with it and figure out what it can do, what it cannot do, and maybe we will discover something unusual. So, and I think through this play, through this set of experiments, we can really understand how is it going to be used in the future. And I'm not scared. I don't think it's going to replace anyone. I just think that it's just a new tool. So let's have fun and let's try to build more projects and share and be open, saying that, okay, this project has been created 95% by an LLM, and as I just chatted with it. I would love to hear more about projects like this.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up to this specific conversation. I think you've probably, like me, heard AI come up in many of the talks over the course of the past day and a half. And I expect that to continue as we continue these conversations, as it is this new piece of technology that we're playing with and doing different things with. So I'd love to do a big round of applause for our speakers, both here on stage and virtually.